Why was she so calm when the sky was breaking apart above her? No one else noticed the way her breathing slowed, the way her fingers brushed the chipped paint of her rifle like it was a rosary. Storms had always carried meaning for her, not just weather, a warning, a reminder, a question from the world itself. Do you still belong here? Do you still have the fire to stay? She didn't answer it aloud, not yet. The others were busy, checking gear, tightening straps, whispering nervously about what waited at the far end of the valley. Their voices blended with the growl of the engines, with the metal creak of the troop carrier as it shook against the wind. Lightning flashed against the ridgeline, but the thunder never reached them. It stayed curled inside the black mountains like a growl refusing to be released. And still she sat still, silent, watching her own hands more than the storm. Because inside, another storm was already raging. It wasn't fear, it wasn't courage either. It was something sharper, something born years before in a life she rarely allowed herself to remember. Every mission forced it to the surface, whether she wanted it or not. She had learned to keep her face blank, her breathing steady, her movements precise. But the truth was different. Every mission began with the same war inside her. And tonight, it was stronger than usual. She could feel it in her pulse, in the way her jaw locked without her telling it to, in the faint tremor she had to disguise as steady control. "Hey, Morales," one of the men said, his voice breaking the rhythm of the carrier's engine. He leaned forward, a crooked grin under sweat-darkened hair. "You ever get nervous before one of these, or are you just whatever that is?" His tone was casual, but it carried weight. The others lifted their eyes, some curious, some half-amused, waiting for her reply. She looked up just long enough for him to see her expression. A slow blink, a faint shake of her head, and nothing more. He chuckled, rubbing his neck. "All right, guess that's a no." The others went back to their own distractions, but his question lingered in the air. Because she was nervous, always, she just carried it differently. The carrier jolted as the driver shouted something over the comms. Static filled the cabin. The storm outside seemed to answer, pushing harder against the steel shell. Her teammates braced themselves. She didn't move. She was somewhere else now, somewhere years away. Rain against a cracked rooftop. The sound of her brother's voice through the static of a broken radio. His words, half lost, half begging. She'd been too far to reach him then. Too late to change what had already happened. That was the night she swore storms would never just be weather again. The promise sat inside her chest even now, carved deep, invisible to the others. She drew in a breath, slow, deep, held it, released it. When she opened her eyes, the carrier was still here. The storm was still outside, but the fire inside her, the one no rain could put out, was awake again. 30 seconds, the driver yelled. Helmets clicked, magazines locked, shoulders straightened. Fear and focus blurred into the same nervous energy inside the cramped cabin. She adjusted her rifle without looking at it, her hands knowing the weight by heart. And then she glanced at the others, the same faces she'd studied for days, some seasoned, some too young, all of them masking something. One fiddled with a ring tied to his vest. Another kissed a patch sewn inside his glove, tiny rituals, human fragments hidden beneath armor and training. She noticed them because she understood them, because she had her own. But hers was quieter, invisible, just breath, just silence. The rear door hissed open. Rain slashed across the steel, cold and unwelcoming. The valley stretched ahead, dark and endless, its walls glowing faintly with lightning. No one spoke. They just moved, boots striking mud, rifles rising, eyes adjusting to the weight of the unknown. She was the last to step out. And when her boot hit the ground, the storm seemed to pause, a silence between raindrops, a heartbeat caught in the air. No one else felt it, no one else noticed. But she did. The team spread into formation, moving toward the tree line where shadows waited. Their mission had been briefed in cold words: locate, secure, extract. But what hid in those woods was no checklist, no target on paper. It was something more complicated, more dangerous, something even command couldn't define clearly. She knew that, and she knew what the others didn't. Storms like this never came without reason. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of soil and electricity. Her eyes traced every movement, branches swaying too slowly, shadows stretching too far. Each detail whispered a story she couldn't yet piece together. She adjusted her breathing again. The storm outside matched the rhythm inside her chest. One step, then another. "Morales, take rear." The squad leader's voice cracked through the comms. She nodded, no words needed. Rear was where they always placed her, not out of distrust, but because no one quite knew how to read her. She moved differently. She fought differently. She carried silence like a shield, and that unsettled people. They respected her skills, they doubted her presence, and they never asked why. She preferred it that way. Because if they ever knew the real reason she was here, if they ever understood what she carried into every mission, they wouldn't look at her the same. The team advanced deeper into the valley. Rain blurred their visors. Mud swallowed their boots. And still the storm pressed closer, refusing to stay in the sky. One of the younger soldiers whispered over the comms, his voice tight. "Feels wrong out here, like the ground itself is watching us." Another snapped back, irritated, "Shut it, focus." But she heard the tremor in his voice. She understood it because he wasn't wrong. Something was watching. She could feel it. Her hand tightened on her rifle, not in panic, in recognition. The storm hadn't come to scare them. It had come to warn her, to remind her of the promise she made that night years ago. And as she exhaled, a flicker of heat burned behind her ribs, the same fire that had kept her alive when everything else tried to break her. She remembered her brother's face, the way his eyes never gave up, even when his voice cracked, the way he had believed she'd rise higher than him one day. That belief had kept her moving through years of silence, years of being underestimated, overlooked, doubted. They thought her silence was emptiness, but it was full, heavy, alive. The storm came for her, but it didn't understand her yet. Not yet. A branch snapped in the tree line. Everyone froze. The comms went quiet. Her pulse didn't spike, it steadied. The fire inside her flared. She lowered into a crouch, scanning the darkness, rain dripping from the brim of her helmet. The others shifted, waiting for a command. None came. And that was when she knew this mission would not go the way command had promised. It would demand more, cost more. She didn't fear that, she feared something else. That in the end, the fire inside her might burn everything it touched. That night was only beginning. And before it ended, the storm would know her fire by name. What did she hear in that silence that the others could? The rain masked so much, the shuffle of boots in the mud, the hiss of their own breathing, but underneath something else moved, a rhythm that didn't belong to the storm or to them. It was faint, almost drowned out, but she caught it. The valley had a heartbeat tonight, and it wasn't theirs. The squad leader raised his fist, halting the line. His voice came low over comms, taut with discipline. Eyes open, nothing sloppy. She slowed her breathing, dropped her gaze to the ground, then back up to the trees. Movement, just enough to trigger instinct. A shadow sliding where no shadow should. A pause too deliberate. Her finger brushed the safety on her rifle but didn't press. Not yet. She waited, watching, listening. Because she knew from experience, the first thing that moves is rarely the thing that matters. The young soldier to her left, the one who'd whispered his unease earlier, shifted nervously. His boot sank into a puddle, louder than it should have been. He flinched. She glanced at him, saw his throat tighten, saw the panic behind his visor. He wasn't ready, not for this. And yet here he was, carrying the same weight they all carried. She wanted to reach out, steady him somehow. But that wasn't what this place allowed. Out here, comfort was dangerous. A word too soft could cost time, Time could cost lives. So she stayed silent, watching him the way she watched the storm. The squad leader signaled again, "Advance." One by one, they slipped into the tree line, swallowed by the dark. The air inside the woods was different, thicker, heavy with moss and water. The canopy above caught the lightning, twisting it into fractured glimmers. The storm's voice was muffled here but not silenced. Every step felt louder than it should. Every branch seemed ready to break. And then something did. A sharp crack split the stillness, too loud to be a twig, too deliberate. Rifles snapped upward, eyes scanned, breaths held. "Contact," someone whispered. The squad leader raised his hand, demanding quiet. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. The woods had turned to stone. But she felt it still there, watching, waiting. Her memories returned uninvited. Another forest, another mission, another time she'd felt the weight of unseen eyes. That one hadn't ended well. She had walked away from it, but not untouched. The silence of that night had followed her, carved itself into her bones. This moment felt the same. She exhaled slowly. 2 o'clock, she said into the comms. Her voice was low, steady, not loud enough to echo, not soft enough to be ignored. The others shifted, rifles adjusting to her call-out. Some trusted her, others doubted. That was fine. She hadn't spoken for them, she had spoken for the storm. Because if she was wrong, it wouldn't matter, and if she was right. The silence broke. A figure lunged from the shadows, fast, blurred by rain, then another, then more. The air exploded with shouts, rifle fire, the crack of branches. The storm above roared as if it had been waiting for this moment, thunder rolling like applause. She moved without thought. A step back, her rifle raised, breath aligned with the shot. One target down, shift, exhale, another. Her silence became her weapon. She didn't shout, didn't waste words. Every movement was precise, stripped of panic. Around her the squad fought hard, their noise filling the night. Orders barked, warnings cried, but she was the opposite, stillness in chaos, fire in the storm. The clash was brutal but brief. Shadows dissolved back into the trees. Silence returned, jagged and uneven. The squad leader called for a count. Voices answered, one by one. Except one. The young soldier, the nervous one. She turned, scanning the ground. Mud churned where he had been. A trail dragged into the dark. "Damn it," the squad leader hissed. "They've got him." The squad froze, tension bleeding into fear. One less voice, one less body, and all of them thinking the same thing. What now? She lowered her rifle, not in surrender, in decision. Because she already knew the answer. The leader spoke fast, his tone harsh. "We stick to the mission. No chasing. We lose one, we don't lose six." Murmurs of agreement, some reluctant, some resigned. The squad adjusted formation, already shifting back to the plan. But she didn't move. She stared into the dark where the boy had been dragged. The silence there was louder than the storm. Her chest tightened. A memory flared, her brother's voice, fatting over the radio, lost because she hadn't reached him in time. Too far, too late. No, not again. The fire in her chest surged. "Morales," the leader barked. "Rear, let's go." She didn't answer. He turned, eyes narrowing inside his visor. "Don't you." But she was already gone. One step, then another, into the dark, into the storm. The others shouted after her, but she didn't hear. Or maybe she chose not to. Because this wasn't about disobedience. It wasn't about orders. It was about promises. She had broken one once. She would not break it again. The woods swallowed her whole. The storm thinned here, raindrops quieter under the canopy. Shadows stretched, deeper, hungrier. Her boots sank into mud, but her steps were soundless. Her rifle hung low, her breath shallow. She followed the trail, drag marks, mud churned by struggling boots, faint but enough. Every sense sharpened, every nerve awake. The fire in her chest burned steady, not frantic, not wild, controlled, focused. Because fear was noise, and she had no space for noise. A muffled cry, a head small, desperate. Her grip tightened, she froze, listening. The boy's voice strained, weak. Alive. Relief flickered through her, but she crushed it. Relief was dangerous too. She needed silence. She needed fire. She pressed on, each step slower than the last. She moved like the storm itself, creeping, building, inevitable. The trail curved into a clearing. Shapes hunched over, dragging, binding. 3, 4, more. The boy on the ground, struggling weakly. His eyes wide, pleading, locked on her for just an instant before the shadows shifted to block him. She stayed in the tree line unseen, heart steady, breath slow. This was the moment storms were made for. Her finger hovered. She could strike now. She could call the squad. She could do a dozen things. But she didn't. Because this wasn't just about saving him. This was about her, about the silence she carried, about the fire she had sworn would not die. She closed her eyes for a breath, saw her brother again, heard his last words, the ones she hadn't been able to answer. And when she opened them, her fire met the storm. The night leaned in closer. And the storm, for the first time, seemed afraid. What did the boy see in her eyes at that moment, before the shadows blocked his view? He saw something he couldn't name, something steadier than the storm, sharper than fear. For him, it was just a flicker of hope. For her, it was something heavier, a memory, a promise, a fire that no one else would ever understand. She crouched in the tree line, watching the figures in the clearing. Their movements were quick, deliberate. They bound the boy's wrists with cord, gagged his mouth with cloth torn from their own gear. He kicked weakly, but they worked in silence, unhurried, as if they'd done this 100 times before. She studied them, counted them, 4, maybe 5. The storm blurred their outlines, rain dripping off their shoulders. They blended with the trees, with the mud, hard to see, easy to lose. But not to her, never to her. She steadied her breath, letting the storm fill her lungs, then release in silence. Her rifle lifted an inch, her finger resting against the curve of the trigger. One shot in the clearing would change. One shot in chaos would ripple. But she didn't fire. Not yet. Because chaos didn't guarantee survival, not for the boy, not for her. And because the storm had taught her something long ago, silence can be more powerful than sound. So she waited. The boy struggled again. His eyes searched wildly, as if begging for anyone, anything to intervene. For a moment his gaze flicked to the tree line again, toward her. And she thought of her brother. The night he'd begged her through static. The night she hadn't reached him in time. The night her silence had been mistaken for absence, when in truth it had been the weight of knowing she was too far away. Not this time. Her jaw tightened, her hands steadied. She would not repeat that mistake. A voice cut through the clearing, harsh, low, the leader of the shadows. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone, commanding, confident. The others obeyed instantly. They hoisted the boy upright, dragging him toward the far side of the clearing. His boots scraped through mud, his body limp but resisting. She tracked them with her sights, her pulse syncing with their steps. Decision pressed against her ribs. Do something now, or risk losing him forever. But her fire told her to wait, to trust her silence. Because storms don't strike with their first flash. They build, they wait. And when they finally release, nothing survives unchanged. She slid deeper into the trees, shadowing the captors as they moved. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. Her silence stretched like wire, tense, unbroken. The boy stumbled. One captor struck him across the back, forcing him forward. She flinched, but didn't move. Not yet. Minutes blurred. The storm's roar dulled her sense of time. The captors led the boy down a slope, toward what looked like an outpost half buried in mud. Broken walls, rusted beams, remnants of something abandoned years ago. She crouched at the ridge, watching. The captors shoved the boy inside. A door clanged shut. And then silence again. Not the silence of emptiness, the silence of waiting. Her breath slowed. She scanned the perimeter. 2 guards posted outside, another figure packing the roofline. Her fire burned hotter. Because she knew this place. Not exactly this outpost, but others like it. Old scars scattered across forgotten valleys, places used not for shelter but for secrets. And she knew what happened to prisoners inside places like this. Her brother had once been inside one. She had never forgiven herself for not reaching him in time. A memory pressed into her mind without permission. She was younger, still learning the weight of the rifle in her hands, her brother standing beside her, his voice calm but firm. You don't fire because you can, you fire because you must. The storm will always ask you to rush, but your silence will tell you when it's time. She had believed him. She had carried those words into every mission. But when he had needed her silence most, she had failed him. The fire in her chest surged, threatening to consume her. Not again, not here. She exhaled slowly, pressing the memory down. Focus returned. The outpost, the guards, the boy inside. The fire told her to move. The silence told her to wait. And for once they didn't feel like opposites. They felt like the same thing. She began her descent, moving like the storm itself, quiet, deliberate, unstoppable. The mud clung to her boots, but she used it, each step muffled, each slide purposeful. Closer, closer. The guards didn't notice. Their eyes scanned the tree line but not the ground, not the storm. She reached the perimeter wall, pressed herself against it, rain dripping down her helmet, her rifle angled low. She listened. The boy's muffled cries, the guards' quiet murmurs, the storm's steady drum. All blending into a rhythm only she could hear. Her finger brushed the trigger. Her fire demanded release. But her silence reminded her, one shot here could bring the roof guards, could alert whoever was inside, could risk the boy's life. She pulled back. Not yet. Instead, she waited for the rhythm to break. One guard shifted, turning his back. The other bent to adjust his gear. The rhythm fractured. She moved. A step, a strike, swift, silent. The first guard dropped before he knew she was there. The second turned, eyes wide. She was already behind him, a breath, a grip, silence. The rhythm ended. 2 guards down, no sound but the storm. She pressed against the wall again, her own breathing steady though her chest burned. The fire wanted more. The silence demanded patience. She scanned the roofline. The guard still paced, unaware. Good. She slipped to the door, pressed her ear against it. Inside, voices, low, controlled, the boy's muffled whimpers beneath them. Her pulse slowed. She closed her eyes again, hearing her brother's words. You don't fire because you can. You fire because you must. And she knew soon it would be time. She opened the door. The storm seemed to follow her inside. The room reeked of damp earth and rust. The boy sat tied to a chair, eyes wide, face pale. 2 figures stood over him, their shadows stretching across the cracked floor. Another leaned in the corner, weapon resting casually against his chest. They turned as the door creaked. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then her fire answered. She stepped forward, rifle rising, her silence shattering at last. The storm outside roared as if it had been waiting. And the fire she unleashed, with every breath, lit the darkness. The storm had come for her. But in that moment it realized. It had made a mistake. What made her stop in the hallway that night? The base was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of silence that made her skin crawl. A generator hummed in the distance, the steady thrum filling the void where laughter and chatter used to live. She pressed her palm against the wall, grounding herself because her chest was tightening again, not from fear, not entirely, but from the weight of choices that hadn't yet been made. She didn't know then that tomorrow would rewrite everything. Her boots moved slowly across the dim corridor, carrying her toward the operations room where the maps glowed faintly under muted lamps. A storm outside pressed against the reinforced glass, rain slicing in sheets, wind rattling the structure like an animal trying to claw its way inside. She thought it was fitting, that the weather mirrored what churned inside her. The others were asleep, or at least pretending. Soldiers had their own rituals for coping. Some told stories until their eyes shut from exhaustion. Some wrote letters they would never send. Some stared at the ceiling, counting cracks, wondering which of them they would never see again. She, however, found herself always drawn to the quiet pulse of the operations room, to the maps, to the lines drawn in ink that dictated lives. A voice broke the silence. "You don't sleep much, do you?" It was Ruiz leaning in the doorway, his silhouette framed against the storm's flashes of lightning. He wasn't mocking, not tonight. He was tired too, his shoulders slumped, his eyes dim, like he'd carried far too many ghosts on his back. She didn't answer at first. She just traced a finger along a red line that curved across the map, the one leading toward their objective. "Sleep doesn't change where that line ends," she murmured. Ruiz stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him. "Maybe not, but sometimes closing your eyes gives you the strength to face it." She let the words hang. He was right and wrong, because strength wasn't something she trusted anymore. It came and went like the wind. What she needed wasn't strength, it was control. He joined her at the table, scanning the maps with the same haunted look she carried. Then softly he admitted, "I had a son, back home. He's 8 now. He doesn't understand why his dad isn't there." His voice cracked just slightly, but he forced a thin smile. "I tell him it's because of storms, that I help people in storms. Makes it easier for him to sleep at night." Her chest tightened. She hadn't expected that from him. The always joking, always masking Ruiz. But here in this quiet, storm-lit room, the mask had slipped. She whispered, "And what do you tell yourself?" His eyes flickered, the silence stretched. Then he said, almost a whisper, "That maybe one day he'll forgive me." The words hit her harder than she expected. Because forgiveness, that was a word she had buried deep inside herself. Forgiveness from a brother who never got to grow old. Forgiveness from a father who believed she'd chosen this path over family. Forgiveness from herself for surviving when others hadn't. She looked back at the map, refusing to let him see the tremor in her hands. "We all want forgiveness, Ruiz, but some storms don't let it come." The storm outside slammed against the glass then, as if punctuating the truth of it. He didn't push. He just nodded, shoulders heavier than before, and quietly left her there. When she was alone again, she exhaled, long and shaky, her breath fogging the map under the lamplight. She knew she was breaking. The cracks were there, anyone who looked closely enough could see them. But she couldn't afford to break, not yet. Tomorrow would demand more of her than she had ever given. Sleep never came that night, only shadows and the storm. By dawn, the briefing room was filled with tension sharp enough to cut skin. The commander laid out the plan with clinical precision. Timelines, coordinates, extraction points. Every syllable carried weight. She sat still, her face unreadable, her silence deliberate. The others leaned forward, asking questions, cracking their knuckles, masking their nerves with bravado. She simply listened. But the commander noticed. He always noticed her silence. He paused mid-sentence, his eyes landing on her like a spotlight. "Do you have something to add, Lieutenant?" A beat, everyone turned. The room held its breath. She swallowed. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Words balanced at the edge of her tongue, the truth she wanted to say, the doubt she wanted to confess, the fear she wanted to admit. But she didn't. Not here. Not now. Instead, she shook her head. "No, sir, nothing to add." The commander studied her longer than was comfortable, then nodded, continuing. "They thought it was silence from confidence. But it was. It was silence from survival, because the truth was heavier than they were ready for. Later, when the helicopters cut through the morning haze, blades thundering against the air, she sat strapped in, rifle across her chest, helmet visor down. The city below stretched like veins of concrete and steel, the storm now only a whisper behind them. Ruiz sat across from her, eyes shut, lips moving silently. Maybe a prayer, maybe a letter to his son he'd never send. She wanted to close her eyes too, but when she did, she saw fire, smoke, screams, memories that didn't belong to this mission but haunted her still. Her brother's face, half lit in the glow of a burning horizon. She snapped them open again, locking her gaze on the blurred earth below. The helicopter bucked suddenly, turbulence shaking them hard, a reminder that even the sky could betray them. She clenched the straps tighter, her breathing quickened. No one noticed, it was masked by the roar of engines, but inside she was spiraling again. Because she knew something none of them did. Something she hadn't told them. And with every mile closer to their objective, that truth clawed deeper into her chest. Why did her pulse spike the moment the city came into view? From above, it looked almost calm, streets winding like veins, rooftops stacked in uneven grids, patches of smoke rising from corners where the storm hadn't yet washed them clean. But calm was an illusion. She knew that better than anyone. Calm was the breath before a scream. The helicopter dipped lower, blades chopping the air, dust spiraling into whirlwinds beneath them. Inside the cabin, no one spoke. The weight of silence pressed against their armor heavier than the steel they carried. Helmets tilted down, eyes shut, lips moving with prayers or curses. Soldiers had their own ways of bracing for impact. She sat rigid, every muscle locked, her rifle resting against her chest like both weapon and shield. The vibration rattled through her bones, a constant reminder that control was slipping. She tried to steady her breathing, counting the inhales, holding them, letting them out slow. 1, 2, 3, but no rhythm held, not when the past kept clawing its way forward. Her brother's voice haunted the hum of the engine. She remembered him at 16, running across the cracked concrete lot back home, laughter trailing behind him. "Don't be afraid of storms," he had said once, daring her to race into the rain. "They only test if you're still standing when they're gone." He hadn't known those words would echo here now, years later, in the belly of a machine flying her toward another storm, one that would demand more than endurance. The pilot's voice cracked through the comms. 2 minutes. Her heart slammed against her ribs. 2 minutes until descent. 2 minutes until boots on ground. 2 minutes until the choice she'd avoided would corner her with no escape. Ruiz caught her eye. No words, just a look, steady, grounding, like he could see the quake under her calm. She forced a nod back, pretending the silence between them was enough. The helicopter banked, rattling hard, and then the city swallowed them whole. Buildings rose sharp against the horizon, glass fractured by war, walls scarred by shrapnel. Smoke smeared the skyline. Somewhere in the distance, a single dog barked, faint but defiant. "Go, go, go." Boots hit concrete. Shouts cut through the roar of the departing rotor wash. Dust stung their eyes, the air thick with grit and the metallic tang of oil. They moved in formation, weapons up, scanning every rooftop, every alley, every shadow. She felt the shift immediately. The city wasn't just watching them, it was waiting. The kind of waiting that prickled the back of the neck, that carried silence too sharp, too deliberate. Somewhere out there, eyes tracked them. Somewhere, hands tightened on triggers. Her team pressed forward, boots crunching over broken glass. She kept to the rear flank, scanning rooftops, her sniper instincts drawing her gaze upward where the danger always hid. The air was heavy, pressing down, thick with humidity from the storm that had passed but not forgiven. A voice in her comm cracked in, "Contact left." Gunfire ripped the silence apart. Concrete splintered. The air exploded with noise, heat, chaos. Her rifle swung up, scope catching the glint of a barrel in a shattered window. She squeezed. The recoil jolted her shoulder, the figure collapsed, the window dark again. Her breath came fast now, chest heaving. The city was alive with fire. Shouts echoed, commands overlapping. Ruiz cursed into the calms. Another soldier screamed. The world spun into fragments, flashes of muzzle fire, acrid smoke filling the throat, boots pounding hard against pavement. And in that chaos, the truth clawed its way to the surface again. She knew this ambush wasn't random. She knew because she had seen the intel first, buried deep in the reports, ignored by command. She had read it, memorized it, swallowed it like poison. The enemy knew their route, knew their objective, and she had said nothing. Why? Because speaking it out loud meant exposing more than just flawed intel. It meant exposing herself, her connection, her mistake, her failure from before, the mission she'd buried, the one tied to her brother's death. She pushed the thought down, firing again, the crack of her rifle cutting through the roar. Ruiz barked coordinates into his mic, rallying the team to cover. A soldier dragged another behind a burned-out car, blood streaking the pavement. The storm had passed outside, but inside this city it had just begun. They pressed into a narrow street, walls closing in, windows looming like hollow eyes. Gunfire echoed, ricocheting off stone. Every corner felt like teeth waiting to bite. Sweat trickled down her neck, stinging her collar, her hands slick inside her gloves. She wiped them against her thigh, kept moving. "Lieutenant, take the overwatch." She didn't hesitate. Boots pounded stairs two at a time, lungs burning. She reached the rooftop, dropped low against the ledge, rifle steady on the edge of crumbling brick. From above, the scene below unfolded sharp and clear. Her scope tracked movement, muzzle flashes bursting like fleeting stars. She squeezed. One target dropped. Another ducked. Her heart raced with each pull, but her hands stayed steady. This was where she belonged, in the quiet between heartbeat and trigger, where control returned, where the storm bent to her breath. Yet even here, perched above, the truth gnawed at her ribs. She had led them into this, by silence, by choice, by fear. Her radio crackled. "We need a route out now." Her eyes scanned the grid of streets, the collapsed buildings, the twisting alleys. There, a narrow gap leading to the riverbank. Risky, exposed, but possible. She pressed the comm. "North alley 2 blocks east, push hard, I'll cover." No one questioned. They trusted her eyes, trusted the silence that had always meant certainty. But inside she was breaking. One by one, her team darted through the alley, shadows moving under her scope. She dropped suppressive fire, her rifle a metronome of control, holding back the tide as long as she could. Ruiz was last, dragging another wounded soldier by the vest. She fired until the magazine clicked empty, then slammed another in, sweat blurring her vision. Her chest burned, her arms ached, but she didn't stop, not until the last shadow disappeared into cover. Only then did she pull back, legs trembling as she bolted for the stairwell, boots slamming against concrete. Every sound echoed too loud, her breath, her pounding heart, the distant gunfire that still chased them. When she reached the street, Ruiz caught her shoulder, eyes wild. "You saved us up there." She almost laughed at the word. Saved. No, not yet. Not when the storm she had carried inside her was still waiting to break. Because she knew this wasn't over. The ambush was only the beginning. And the truth she hadn't told them, the one tied to her brother, to a mission gone wrong, to the enemy who knew their every move, was about to rise like fire through the cracks. But not yet. Not until the storm came for her again. What made her stop in the alley when everyone else kept moving? The rain had started again, faint at first, then harder, drumming on the tin roofs above like 1,000 impatient fingers. The others pressed forward, pulling the wounded, scanning corners, calling into comms. But she froze, mid-step, rifle raised, breath caught in her throat. Because the smell hit her. Burned oil, charred wood, the faint sting of iron in the air. It wasn't just this city's scent, it was the same smell from years ago. The same night her brother never came home. The night fire swallowed the horizon and she learned what silence cost. Her chest clenched. Her fingers trembled against the trigger. She blinked hard, forcing the memory down, but the alley blurred between past and present. A wall cracked with bullet holes looked too much like the one she had pressed against that night. The echo of a scream, hers, his, she couldn't tell, rattled in her skull. "Lieutenant, move!" Ruiz's voice snapped her back. She jerked forward, boots splashing through puddles, forcing herself into motion. But inside, she was unraveling again. The team regrouped behind a collapsed wall, catching breath, checking ammo, pulling bandages tight around bleeding arms and legs. Rain streaked their faces, mixed with dirt, sweat, and fear. No one spoke more than necessary. The silence between words was louder than the gunfire they'd escaped. She crouched beside Ruiz, who was pressing gauze into a soldier's shoulder wound. His hands were steady, his jaw tight. He glanced up at her. "You good?" It was the simplest question, the hardest to answer. She nodded anyway. The lie slipped out smoother than the truth ever could. He didn't believe it, she saw it in his eyes, but he didn't press. Not now. Her comm crackled, the commander's voice sharp through the static. "Status." She keyed her mic. 6 wounded, 1 critical. Objective compromised, requesting new coordinates. Static hummed back, then silence. Her stomach dropped. No acknowledgement, no orders. The line was dead. "Comms are jammed," Ruiz muttered, testing his own. Nothing but white noise. The team shifted, unease rippling through them. Being cut off meant being blind. Alone. The city wasn't just waiting for them anymore, it had closed its grip. She looked at their faces, mud-streaked, eyes wide, breaths quick. Soldiers, yes, but human first. Each carrying stories, families, regrets. One clutched a photograph in his pocket when he thought no one was looking. Another hummed softly under his breath, the same bar of a song on repeat. Human anchors in an inhuman storm. And here she was, their unspoken compass. Silent, steady, but carrying a truth that could shatter all of it. She remembered the classified report she'd read before deployment, buried in encrypted files, marked irrelevant, but she'd seen the names, the coordinates, the signatures, and one name had burned hotter than the rest: her brother. He wasn't just collateral in an old mission gone wrong. He was tied to this city, to this enemy, to the storm they were now trapped inside. But how could she tell them that this ambush wasn't chance? That this city wasn't just another battleground, it was the echo of a mission that had failed years ago, that she had seen it coming and said nothing. Her silence wasn't cowardice, it was survival. If she spoke, she risked unraveling not just herself but the entire mission. Yet silence had a cost, and she was running out of time before it came due. "Lieutenant," Ruiz's voice broke through, low but firm, "we need to move. You've got the call." She looked at him. Mud streaked across his cheek, rain dripping from his helmet, eyes tired but sharp. He didn't ask what she was hiding. He just asked for direction, trust without conditions. Her throat tightened. She gave the order, "North Bank. We find the river, push east, we don't stop." The team nodded, no hesitation. They trusted her voice even when she had none for herself. They pushed on, weaving through ruins, boots splashing in puddles, weapons raised. The rain blurred the edges of the world, muting sound, softening shapes. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every silence felt like bait. She scanned rooftops, alleys, windows. Her scope darted left, right, up, down. Nothing. But the absence itself was a trap. She knew it. She felt it. Her brother's voice haunted again, low and steady in her memory. "Storms don't come to test the strong. They come to see who bends, who breaks, and who burns." She clenched her jaw. She had bent before, she had broken. But now the fire inside her was rising. A sudden crack split the air, a sniper's round. One of hers went down screaming. "Cover," Ruiz shouted. They dove behind rubble as bullets chewed stone into dust. She pressed her cheek to her scope, scanning windows through the rain. Then she saw it. 3rd floor, left window, just the faintest flicker of movement. She exhaled, slow, steady, her finger curled. The shot broke clean, the window shattered, silence followed. But silence here was never safety. She pulled back, lungs burning, heart racing. She saved them, yes, but each shot was a reminder of what she owed, what she still hadn't said. They moved again, slower now, tighter, every step deliberate. As they rounded a corner, Ruiz fell in beside her, his voice low, barely audible over the rain. "You're carrying something, I can see it." Her grip tightened on her rifle. He continued, not pushing, just stating. "Whatever it is, it's not just yours anymore. You don't have to carry it alone." She swallowed hard, staring straight ahead. The truth pressed against her lips, desperate to break free, about her brother, about the mission, about the intel she had buried. But the storm inside her still wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. So she said nothing. And the silence roared louder than the gunfire ever could. Why did the city feel alive, even as the rain washed its streets clean? Every step she took, she felt it, the pulse of history, of secrets buried in rubble, of lives lost and debts unpaid. The storm outside had finally eased, leaving only the distant hum of water trickling down shattered gutters and the occasional drip from cracked eaves. But the storm inside her, the one she carried in every bone, every breath, had only grown stronger. They moved cautiously now, her team pressing forward through alleys littered with debris, broken carts, and scattered papers that hinted at lives interrupted. Each corner was a question, each window a potential threat, but she saw something others didn't, something familiar. The burned-out frame of a vehicle stopped them. Rusted, charred, unrecognizable, but etched into the side was a symbol, a small, almost invisible insignia. Her heart stopped. Her brother's insignia. She froze, boots muddy, fingers tight on her rifle, eyes scanning every shadow. Memories came crashing back, his voice over the radio, sharp, confident, calm in the face of fire. The night he'd vanished. The mission they'd both been on that went wrong. The promises she hadn't kept. The team noticed her pause. Ruiz leaned in, his eyes questioning, waiting. "Something wrong?" he asked softly. She shook her head, forcing herself forward. "Keep moving, check the alley to the right, now." But her mind raced, circling back to the insignia. Someone here knew him. Someone had kept the memory alive. Or worse, someone had been waiting for her to arrive. As they moved deeper, she began to notice patterns. Buildings scarred in ways that weren't random, piles of supplies arranged almost deliberately, and marks in the mud that suggested more than just soldiers passing through. Her gut told her this wasn't just an ambush, it was personal. A whisper of movement caught her attention, a shadow detaching from a doorway, moving just beyond the reach of their light. She signaled the team to halt. Her pulse quickened, fingers tight on the rifle, eyes narrowed. The shadow paused, then stepped into view, and her breath caught. It was him, not alive, not quite, but the memory of him recreated. A figure she recognized instantly from every photograph, every memory, every haunting echo of loss. "Brother," she whispered, though she knew he wouldn't answer. "Not here, not now." The figure shifted, almost mocking, almost real. The storm outside had passed, but the air itself trembled. Time felt warped, stretched thin like paper over fire. She could feel every heartbeat, every drop of rain hitting the concrete, every distant echo of gunfire that wasn't theirs. Ruiz's voice broke through her trance. "Lieutenant." She blinked and refocused. The team's eyes were wide, scanning, alert. She gave a tight nod, forcing herself to the present. Survival demanded it. Emotion, no matter how raw, had to wait. The figure moved again, closer, deliberate, almost dancing between shadows and light. And then she understood. It wasn't her brother. It was someone who had been trained to emulate him, to trigger memories, to exploit the weakness she carried silently. A trap, a test, and she was the target. She signaled silently, pointing to the flanks. They fanned out, weapons ready, eyes sharp. Every instinct screamed that the next seconds would decide everything. A burst of gunfire shattered the fragile calm. A team member screamed, dropping to the ground. Mud and rain mixed with blood splattering her boots. She fired. The figure ducked. Another round echoed. But her eyes never left the shadow, never left the insignia. The enemy had been meticulous. They knew who she was. They knew what she carried. And they were forcing her to face it head-on. Her chest burned with fire and guilt, but her mind went cold with resolve. This wasn't just about saving the team anymore. It was about finally confronting the past she had buried under mission after mission, under silence after silence. They moved toward a warehouse at the center of the ruins, the place that seemed to pulse with intent. Inside, shadows moved like smoke. Her brother's emblem marked the crates and walls. Photographs, letters, logs, all pieces of a puzzle she had refused to see before. Her throat tightened. Each piece hit like a hammer. The intel she had buried in her mind, the secrets she had carried in silence, all pointed here, to this moment, to this confrontation. She realized then that she had been running from more than danger. She had been running from herself. She took a deep breath, steadying her shaking hands. Her fire had been building for years, fed by guilt, loss, and determination. And now it would release not in anger, but in focus, precision, and clarity. She signaled the team forward. They entered the warehouse slowly, every step measured. The enemy, knowing they were close, tried to set traps, tripwires, scattered debris, ambush positions. But she led them through each with quiet efficiency, reading the battlefield with the same instinct her brother had once praised in her. They reached the center. The room opened into a space cluttered with supplies and old furniture, soaked in rain and shadow. And there, bound but alive, was the boy from the earlier ambush. His eyes went wide when he saw her, recognition and relief mixing with fear. She rushed to him, cutting the bindings, brushing mud from his face. "You're safe now," she whispered, voice breaking. But she didn't allow herself to linger. Not yet. There was still one shadow left. The final enemy figure stepped from the corner, rifle aimed, posture deliberate. The storm of the city outside was gone. The storm in her chest roared louder. She didn't hesitate. Every movement was a conversation with the past, every breath a negotiation with guilt. Her rifle rose, steady, sight locked on the figure. She remembered the night her brother had died, the last orders he had given, the lessons he had taught. And then she fired. The figure collapsed. Silence fell, thick and oppressive. The boy clutched her arm, shaking. Ruiz and the team moved in, securing the area, eyes wide with a mix of awe and relief. She lowered her rifle, chest heaving, rain dripping from her helmet. The fire inside her burned bright, but it was tempered now, honed by survival and truth. Later outside, the city sprawled quiet under a gray sky. Smoke rose from distant buildings, but the immediate danger had passed. The boy was safe, the team intact, and she finally allowed herself to feel the weight lift slightly. Ruiz approached, eyes soft. "You did it, you saved them all." She shook her head. "No, we did it together." But even as she said it, her mind lingered on her brother, on the storm that had shaped her, on the silence she had carried for years. She realized that fire wasn't just destruction, it was resilience. And sometimes it wasn't loud. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it was a promise kept in quiet moments. The boy looked up at her, eyes wide, innocent. "Are we safe?" She knelt beside him, voice calm but firm. "For now. But storms are never really over. You just learn how to move through them." She glanced at her team, each member a mix of fatigue, relief, and lingering fear. They had followed her through chaos, through silence, through fire. They trusted her. And in that trust she found a measure of redemption. Her chest still burned, but the fire was no longer just pain. It was life, strength, resolve. The storm had come for her, yes, but she had unleashed something far fiercer with every breath she drew. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And as she looked out over the city, rain washing the streets clean, she realized that even storms end. But the fire she carried, the fire she had learned to trust, to control, to wield, it would remain, quiet, powerful, unyielding. The silence lingered, a calm after chaos, a promise that even when the world waited in shadow, someone could stand steady and see it through. She exhaled, and for the first time in years the weight of her past felt lighter, not gone but balanced. The storm had tested her, the city had tested her, but she had survived, and in that survival she discovered what fire could do when wielded with purpose. Why did the dawn feel heavier than the night? She stepped over debris, mud clinging to her boots, water dripping from her helmet, eyes scanning the horizon. The city was quiet now. Too quiet. Smoke curled lazily from half-destroyed buildings, the scent of rain and fire mixing into something sharp and metallic. The storm had passed, leaving behind a wounded landscape and the weight of what had been endured. She carried the boy's hand as they walked. He was small, shivering, but alive. Safe for now. But the fire in her chest wasn't done. It never was. Behind them, her team moved with exhaustion and relief carved into their faces. Their shoulders slumped, hands trembling from adrenaline and fear, but they followed her silently. She didn't need them to speak. She knew the bond had been forged long before bullets or storms demanded it. Ruiz walked beside her, gaze fixed on the horizon. "We're alive," he said, voice low, almost uncertain. "That counts for something." She nodded but didn't answer. Alive, yes, but at what cost? Her thoughts drifted to her brother again, to the night that had defined her, to the silence she had carried through every mission since. The fire inside her had been honed, sharpened by loss, guilt, and the weight of responsibility, and now it had been unleashed in full. They reached the riverbank, the water reflecting gray skis above. The current moved with quiet persistence, like life itself, unstoppable, relentless, indifferent to fear. She knelt beside the boy, brushing mud from his face, smoothing his hair. He looked at her, eyes wide, fragile trust shining through. "You're safe," she said again, but this time it felt heavier. The words were not just reassurance for him, they were a promise to herself. She remembered the last conversation with her brother over comms, years ago, the night the mission went wrong. The static-filled words he had spoken, "Don't let the storm decide for you, decide for yourself." She had failed him then, she would not fail now. The team gathered behind her, quiet, drenched, broken, but intact. Each of them bore small scars, blood-streaking mud, minor cuts, bruises, but their eyes shone with the kind of exhausted pride only survival could forge. One soldier, barely more than a boy, approached her. Trembling, he held up a small photo, mud smearing the edges. "This, my sister, she," his voice broke. "I promised I'd come back to her." She placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but gentle. "You did," she said. "You're here, that's enough for now." The boy nodded, tears streaking his face, relief mingling with fear. And in that small moment she understood something. The storm outside wasn't over, but every act of courage, every choice, every fire unleashed left ripples, small victories, moments that mattered more than medals or recognition. Her thoughts returned to her brother, the mission that had shadowed her every step. She could feel his presence here, not in flesh, but in memory, in fire, in every quiet decision she had made. The city, the ambush, the boy, they were all echoes of what had come before, and she had faced them. The commander's voice finally came through the comms, static-laced but steady. "All units accounted for. Status report." She keyed the mic. "Everyone alive, objective reached. No casualties beyond minor injuries. Area secured." The silence that followed was almost unbearable, but then, slowly, the static cleared. "Understood, good work." She exhaled. Not relief, not yet, just exhalation, a breath she had been holding for years. The boy tugged at her sleeve. "Will we go home now?" She paused, looking out over the gray river, her reflection fractured in the water. She wanted to promise him more than survival. She wanted to promise him safety, peace, the kind of life that storms couldn't touch. But she knew that was impossible. Storms would always come. Life would always demand more. So she smiled faintly, soft but firm. "We go forward," she said. "Step by step, that's how we get home." He nodded, understanding more than his years should allow. And in that understanding, she saw the purpose that had driven her since the beginning. Not just the mission, not just survival, but the fire that refused to be contained. They began moving along the riverbank, shadows stretching long in the dim morning light. Every sound, the lapping of water, the distant caw of a bird, the creak of ruined metal, reminded her that life persisted. That even in destruction there was movement, progress, the quiet persistence of hope. Her team stayed close. Ruiz glanced at her from time to time, silent questions in his eyes. She didn't answer them. She didn't need to. They had followed her, trusted her, survived with her. That was enough. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And she had acted. Hours later, they reached a temporary extraction point. Helicopters hovered overhead, rotors beating against the calm that had returned. The boy ran toward the waiting medics, turning to wave once at her. She waved back, but her mind lingered on the fire she carried, the weight of decisions made, and the storms yet to come. Ruiz approached, careful, measured. "You okay?" She looked at him, mud-streaked, exhausted, fire still burning behind her eyes. "I am," she said. "Not entirely true, but honest enough for now. I will be." He nodded, and she realized that trust, survival, and action were enough to hold them all together, even in the aftermath of chaos. As the helicopters lifted them away, the city shrinking beneath them, she allowed herself to breathe fully for the first time in years. The fire inside her no longer burned only with guilt or fear. It burned with purpose, resilience, a promise kept not just to the boy, not just to her team, but to the memory of her brother. The storm had come for her, but in the end she had faced it, endured it, and unleashed something greater. Controlled fire, unwavering resolve, and the quiet power of dignity in action. And the city below, scarred and battered, held the echoes of that fire, whispers of survival and courage. She exhaled, and in that exhalation she found peace. Not complete peace, storms never grant that, but a steady, unwavering presence in the face of them. Sometimes survival isn't about winning, it's about enduring, about carrying the fire forward even when the world expects silence. She watched the horizon, sunlight breaking through the clouds, glinting on wet streets below. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself a small, private smile. The storm had tested her, the city had tested her, but she had endured. And in that endurance she had found fire, hope, and the quiet truth that sometimes the most powerful force is the one you carry silently inside, revealed only when it's needed most. The helicopter ascended higher, leaving the city behind, the river glinting like a silver scar beneath them. She leaned back, eyes closed for just a moment, letting the rhythm of the rotors lull her into something like reflection. And she knew this. Every storm would come again. Every mission would demand more. Every shadow would test her fire. But now she would meet them, not with silence born of fear, not with hesitation, but with the steady, unyielding fire she had learned to trust with every breath. And that fire would never be contained again.